Hello. In this example, we'll want to take an application which uses React and Redux and use some external components. And we're going to start by using some components from a component library called Prime React. And in order for this to work, we have a bunch of new dependencies, which are Prime Flex, Prime Icons, Prime React, and React Transition Group. Now, Prime Flex is something which handles page layout. Prime Icons is just a set of SVG icons, and Prime React are the components themselves, and they've been previously installed. And if I look at index.html, uh, .js, I'm going to see that I've included some CSS files in order for the components, which would work either way, to look nice and themed. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to app and include book list, which doesn't yet contain anything, but we're going to write it shortly. And we assume this is a React component which is housed in booklist.js. Now, booklist, like I said, is going to be a React component. It's going to be a functional component. And for now, let's just write it like this. We're going to have a set of dependencies, right, which we're going to import. So we're going to want to show a table of books. So we're going to import data table, which is a component from Prime React. Now, the data table itself doesn't show anything, so we need an additional component which is called column. And we also need a bunch of things from React and from Redux, right? So from React, we're going to need use state and use effect. And from React Redux, we're going to need use selector and use dispatch, right? To get the state and to dispatch actions. Now, our actions have already been defined and we have them here. They're a bit more complex than we're going to use in this example, but because they contain facilities for filters, paging, and sorting. We're going to add them a bit later. For now, we're just going to need one action, and this is going to be get books. Now this action is going to be dispatched when the component first loads. So first we need dispatch. We're also going to need to take the books from somewhere, so we're going to need a selector. Again, the reducer itself has already been defined and you can find it in the source code. So having the selector, we're now going to say that books is use selector of book selector. And in order for this to be populated, we're going to say use effect. And this is going to have no dependencies because it's only going to be run once. So we're going to say dispatch get books. And for now, we're going to ignore all the filtering and paging and everything else. Now, to actually show the books, we're going to return here a data table which contains some columns. Now, the data table is going to have a value, and the columns are going to have a header. Our books only have a title and the content, so the header is going to be title. And the field, so the property for each of the books is going to be title. And similarly, we're going to have something for content. Right. Uh, and that should be it in order to just see the books. Right. So if we go here, we can reload this, and we can presumably see the books after a while. Right. So after we've added some books. right? So now we should add the facility to add our box, and we're going to want to represent this as as a dialog, right? So we're going to need a couple more components, right? And in order for our components to look similar, we are also going to use two components which are going to be button. Could have used the button from HTML, but we just want it to be styled, right? So input text, input text. Now, since this is going to be a dialog, it's going to need a couple of things, right? So, and it's going to be a dialog containing a form, basically. So we're going to have something in the state of the component. So we're going to have title set title. Then we're going to have content set content. Then we're going to have something to signal that the dialog should be shown. So we're going to say const is dialog shown, and set is dialog shown. Now this is going to start from false. It's not going to be shown. And we'll add additional things after we add the dialog. Now the dialog, which is going to house this in a pseudo root, because otherwise our component would return two things, or not something with a single root. And we're going to have a dialog, and the dialog has to have two things. So visible is going to be is a dialog shown, is dialog shown, and then it has to have an onHide function, right? What happens when we click hide or we press escape? I'll call it hide dialog, and it's going to do something really simple, which is it's going to say is a dialog shown, set is a dialog shown false. Right, so this hides the dialog, but how do we show the dialog? Well, we're going to have a table footer for our data table, which is just going to be some JSX, and let's just call it a div, which contains a button. Now the button, let's say, has the label add, so what's written on it, and it also has a little icon, and here we can use prime icon, so it's prime icon plus, and when we click it, it's going to do handle add click. Now this function has to show the dialog, so primarily it's going to do set is dialog shown true. However, we want our dialog to also double as an editing dialog, so we're going to need a couple of things. So first, we're going to reset everything. So we're going to say set title is, in case something was editing before. So set title is an empty string. Set content is an empty string. Additionally, if we want to also use this as an edit dialog, we should have a distinction. So we're going to say we have is new record, and set is new record, and this starts as true. Right, so when we click add, we know it's a new record. So set is new record, true. Right, so our dialog is going to first of all contain a couple of inputs, right? Because it needs to have the ability to edit in the state of the component the title and the content. And to differentiate, we're going to use a placeholder. This is going to have a value, and whenever we change it, it's going to change the state. Similarly, we're going to have an input text for content and set content. Now, after we've filled in these fields, we will need to actually save something to the server. So let's have a button in a dialog footer. So let's go here and say footer is going to be dialog footer. Right, this doesn't exist yet, but we can cheat a bit and just copy table footer and modify it. Because it's similar. So save, pi save, handle save click. Now, handle save click doesn't exist for now, and it does something a bit different. Right, so this will have to differentiate between the two cases, if we're editing something or adding something new. So this is going to be dependent on is new record. So we're going to say if is new record. And for now, we're only going to have the branch for add. So if is new record, dispatch add book of title and content, which is an action, and we have it here, right? So we have add book, get book, and save book. We don't need it yet, but we're going to need it soon. Now, what happens after I add the book? Well, I'm going to reset everything, right? So it's going to be basically what happened when we showed something, but instead of showing the dialogue when we started editing something, we're going to hide it. Right, and if we now look at our application, we're going to have this little dialogue. We actually have a little error. Let's connect it. This is book list. Let's correct it, sorry. And if we refresh now, we're going to see a list of books. Our data table is responsive, that's why it looks like that. So let's say another book, some more content. And if we save this, we're going to see it appear in our table. Now let's also add editing, and in order to do this, we're going to need to have a button on each of the rows of our table. So we're going to use a different column this time. This is a column which isn't connected to a field, rather it's rendered in a custom fashion. We're going to call it, say it has the body ops column. Now this ops column, we could write it just as JSX, but we want to have some way of handling each of our books, right? So we're going to write it as a function. So I'm going to say ops column as something of row data. And this is going to return something, and it's going to return a button, and the button is going to say edit pi pencil handle edit click. Now obviously we need this function, and now in fact let's modify this and say it's a, here we have a handler, and it's going to say handle edit click. Let's just call it edit book of row data, right? And this is going to be edit book, which is going to be a function of row data. Now we need something else. We need the idea that we've selected the book. We don't have it here because we're going to save a particular book. And for this, we're going to say we have in the state of our component selected book, set selected book, and it starts up as null. Starts off as null. Right. So whenever we click edit book, what's going to happen is we're going to open the dialog, but we're going to open it with a book selected. So we're going to say that set selected book is row data.id. Set title as row data.title because we want to see the previous data. Set content row data.content. Set is a dialog shown true because we want to be able to actually edit it, and set is new record false. Right, so all that's left now is to handle the branch, right? So if it's not a new record, we're going to dispatch something else. So we're going to dispatch save book of selected book and our new content. Let's see if this works. So if we edit something, let's say another book 123, and this works exactly as expected.